What's up, everyone? I hope you are doing well today. This is Raphael Garcia here for episode number 173. I'm here with Schwan Humes for the MMA Ratings podcast. But first and foremost, let me say hello to Schwan. How are you doing there, sir?
No complaints, man. Just staying busy. Staying busy. Finally moved to the apartment. Now just trying to get everything settled and get everything cleaned out of the old place.
A word got moved?
Yeah, I moved about 30 miles out from Georgetown.
True. True. How's that going?
Not bad. We were gonna get a house in Georgetown, but they're super expensive and people overpay just to get out there. So had to move further out and take the better part of the year to see if we can find a house to move into. Right now, just staying in an apartment.
True. True. How was the week with the kids?
Not bad. They don't want to help move. They're kind of done. They had a tournament, and then a couple. They've all been getting calls from coaches about playing in college. I don't know if they want to or not, but they've been contacted by 3 or 4 schools apiece. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's good news. That's definitely good news, man. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So
Uh,
even if you don't, you can say you got the point where colleges were interested in having you play for them, which is an accomplishment in itself. So
that is a big accomplishment.
and this
But
guy
what?
trained him.
Say it again.
This guy's the one who trained him. So
So yeah, no, man, you get part of that praise.
yeah.
So let's go ahead and talk about some MMA today because we got some people to praise and some people to laugh at along the way. We have UFC on ESPN 14 to talk about. That was this past Saturday's card, and also UFC Fight Night 173. That's this coming Saturday's card. But before we do so, as always, I want to take a minute to thank everyone for listening to this content. You can find us at MMAratings.net. That is our flagship where all of our written content and everything going with MMA ratings can be found. You can also go there to rate the fights and let us know how excited you are for upcoming contests and what you thought of some recently past fights as well. You can catch me at rgarcia_sports, Schwan Hughes. You can catch him over at Black Jordan Breen. Across social media, MMA Ratings. You can catch us at MMA Ratings Net on Instagram and Twitter. Check us out on YouTube, on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts as well, Apple iTunes, Google Podcasts as well. As always, be sure to like and subscribe to our content, share it across our social media channels, and let everybody know where you found us. So, Schwan, let's jump right into this and let's talk about Robert Whittaker versus Darren Till. Robert Whittaker picking up a unanimous decision victory over Till, 5 rounds of action. I don't remember what the scorecards were, but it was pretty clear that Whittaker had won. He had a tough go at the start because Darren Till dropped him in the first round. But outside of that, he pretty much did everything he needed to do to get this fight won. Schwan, what did you see that allowed him to take such a commanding lead on Saturday, him being Whittaker?
Basically, Darren Till, for all his vaunted striking background, his approach to striking, his approach to mixed martial arts is very basic, very. It's like very. It's very simple. It's very to the point. There's not a lot of extras. There's not a lot of advanced strategies, layers in his striking or defensive maneuvers. He's pretty much a guy who's big, strong, big, physically durable, strong, and he's a long fighter. And he basically leans on those things as his guideline for success. If you're a certain caliber fighter, you can't manage that because his footwork as a striker is better than the average MMA guy's footwork. He's got length, and to beat length, you have to use fakes, feints, have a jab of your own, long range weapons to get inside to get to him consistently. And then if you get inside on him, he's a durable guy who can take shots and get involved in firefights and kind of exchange with you. So if you're not used to fighting at a high pace, striking, or you're not used to getting hit a lot, then you can take advantage of Till's holes, but he can take advantage of yours. Your lack of familiarity, your lack of conditioning, your lack of durability. In the case of Robert Whittaker, what separated Whittaker was that Whittaker has an educated lead hand. He's got the long range weapons, the front kicks, the leg kicks, and Robert Whittaker's got enough boxing where he can work his way past the distance using his footwork and his feints and use his jab to transition from the edge of the range where Till likes to keep you at to the mid range to the inside where he can get clinches, takedowns, and employ his wrestling and his physical strength. That was basically the difference. Robert Whittaker is just a more developed striker. He leans on his attributes as well. He uses them to kind of reinforce or enhance the technical skills. The biggest difference between each was Till had no jab. Till's lead hand is like garbage. He doesn't do anything. He might parry some shot. He might occasionally throw a jab, but he doesn't establish a jab to come behind it, and he doesn't build off his jab. And so basically once you get past his length, you get past his lead hand, he's got nothing for you. He's really got nothing for you except to swing back and try to clinch with you. He doesn't really have any rules or counters or slips or pivots or turns, but he can assert control and maintain control. He can jump on you quick and get control, which is what he did. But once Whittaker turned the corner, the fight was never really in question ever again.
So in reference to that, did that really kind of surprise you? I thought that Till was going to be the more technical of the two strikers and be able to mix things up and keep Whittaker at range for longer stints of the bout. I thought he would be more crisp. I thought he would be able to land the bigger shots as well too. He was the bigger man, in my opinion, but he wasn't able to do any of that. Did this fight really surprise you that the way it looked after round one?
Not really. I mean, I figured early on he could get something done because Robert Whittaker hasn't always been great defensively. As I said, he depends on his attributes as well, his aggression, those blitzes he uses, and he's not. And early on he's had some slow starts. Adesanya got to him early. Jacare had some moments early, if I recall correctly. Yo Romero had some moments early. Even Derek Brunson had him on skates early on in the fight. So if you can jump on him, you can assert yourself, and you're willing to risk walking through some fire yourself because he hits hard. You want to take that risk. You can get to him early. You can put him on his heels. You can back him up. You can put shots together. The problem is he's tough enough that he can survive most of those things. And since he's got a pretty broad skill set as far as his striking, wrestling, and grappling, he's got options and ways to reset and regain control. Till looks technical because of his stance and how he moves around and he throws things with some control and some poise. And I'm not saying he's not technical. I'm not saying he's awful. I'm just saying, he doesn't have a lot of other options. It's like he has one or two tricks to maintain. Like he'll use his distance, he'll use his volumes, he'll use his length. And once you figure out his tricks, once you figure out what he's trying to do, he has no other way of asserting control. So once Whittaker saw what he had and figured out a solution to it, namely getting his own jab off and starting to feint him back and getting his timing so that he could not overreach on his feints, not commit on the feints, or not walk into shots. Once he figured him out, Darren Till had nothing else. Darren Till had no other way to get control of the fight. He had no other way to maintain control of the fight. He had these 2 or 3 preset things that he was going to do to take advantage of Robert Whittaker's hold. And once it stopped working, he had nothing else. And as good as Till has looked at moments, the fact of the matter is, if you really watch his fights, he wasn't, for as great a striker as he wasn't really great or efficient or impactful against Wonder Boy. And he's one of the guys who made Tyrone Woodley look like a beast on the feet. He walked straight in and got countered and blasted. And this is a guy who considers himself one of the better strikers in the world, mixed martial arts, or a world-class striker. And there's been too many occasions where I've seen guys get to him or seen him be unable to put together enough work to really take over a fight or really put guys away. That's not what you would expect to see from a guy who's got the reputation of a Till. I think he's more reputation and charisma than he is actual skill and ability to apply the skill.
You just said something about reputation and charisma. There was a question that came up. I was actually going to leave it to listener questions, but I'm going to ask it now. Is Darren so overrated? And I look at that because if you look at the way he's lost recently, even going back to the Tyrone Woodley loss where he was submitted, then he was stopped by Jorge Masvidal, and now he has this loss here. He's still young. He's only 26, 27, I believe. So are we going to see him ever turn the corner? But at this point right now, is Darren Till overrated in a sense that he was rushed a little bit too much?
Yeah, it paid off because of his charisma. He's got a certain charm. He's a good-looking guy. He talks a lot. But the fact of the matter is, if you really look at his skills, offensively, he's not doing a lot of things that are so impressive. I don't look at him and say, "Oh, wow, that's just amazing." It's volume, it's length, it's some good technique, but he's not doing anything that I haven't seen before, anything that really separates him from fighters. Because in most of his fights, he's not wiping guys out. He's not running clinics on guys where you're like, this guy doesn't belong in the cage with them. Oftentimes, he's giving as good as he gets, and many times facing guys who aren't as accomplished supposedly as strikers. He's been knocked down. He's been rocked. His defense hasn't held up. So people keep telling me he's an elite guy, but I don't see elite skills. I don't see elite strategy. I don't see elite adjustments. I don't know that he has an elite camp, and athletically, he's not elite either. The thing that makes him elite is probably his durability and his length. Outside of that, he doesn't have an elite skill to his name. He doesn't have elite physical tools, and he doesn't have elite game planning and strategies. It's pretty simple. Once you figure out what he's doing, if you have depth to your striking or your mixed martial arts game, you can put him in spots he doesn't want to be in. You can take advantage of what he's doing. Like I said, once Whitaker got his jab going, at no point did Till get his lead hand going. He couldn't make an adjustment. When he fought Jorge Masvidal, Jorge figured him out, made an adjustment. Till had no answer, because a lot of Till's success is his physical strength and his durability. He leans on those things. And when he leans on them, he's been punished and exploited for those things before, regardless if it's a weight class or whatever. When have you ever seen Darren Till fight? You just fight a guy with a name and say, oh my God, that was an amazing performance. That was spectacular. I've never seen it.
Something interesting that's really been, I want to say, percolating after Saturday's fight is the idea that both men gained with this fight. Not only did Whittaker gain, obviously, because he picked up a W, but Darren Till gained as well. I find it a little bit hard to say that, because a loss is a loss. The middleweight division, I feel like, is more competitive than people give it credit for. It's not lightweight, it's not welterweight, it's not women's strawweight, but it's probably right after that. Maybe after men's bantamweight as well too. Who needed this fight more? Well, Whittaker or Till? And are we giving too much credit, I guess, to Till for how he performed?
Honestly, I think both people are getting too much credit. This is good. This is a win for Till because he faced a guy who's elite or close to elite. And elite, it was competitive and it was exciting and it had some ebbs and flows. It wasn't like the Masvidal fight where he got torched. It wasn't the fight with Wonder Boy where he just eked out a decision and didn't really do anything that stood out. It wasn't the Kelvin Gastelum fight. That guy's kind of been exposed for being as limited as he is. It was a fight against a guy who was still considered one of the elite athletes, one of the elite fighters in the division, and he was able to more or less have a competitive back and forth fight for him. The reason I don't think it's necessarily a win is because, like you said, A, it's a loss, and B, it's a loss that once again exposed limitations in his game. His striking is supposed to be one of his strongest attributes, and there's been at least 3 occasions with Woodley, Whittaker, and Masvidal where he's essentially been outstruck. You could say it's a quick knockout, quick knockdown, you made one mistake, but the fact of the matter is a guy with your pedigree made that mistake against guys who don't usually look this routinely spectacular on their feet against people with that kind of experience and that kind of seasoning in striking. Jorge Masvidal's never looked like that kind of finisher in general against a guy with a solid striking background like that. Even though he knocked out Cowboy Cerrone, he didn't look that good. He lost against Wonder Boy. He didn't look great against him. When's the last time Tyrone Woodley looked dynamic and explosive as a finisher on the feet? Against Robbie Lawler, like years ago? Carlos Condit, years ago before that? These guys who don't often put on these spectacular performances seem to put on tour de forces against Till, which makes me think that Till is either hit the limits of his skill set or he's with a team that's not actively improving his skill sets. To me, he seems like the same fighter he was before, maybe a little bit more poise, a little bit more professionalism. But as far as the options he has and the variety to his game, I can't say I see a whole lot of difference between the Till that came in 2, 3, 4 years ago and the Till that is now. Even for Robert Whittaker, even though it's a win, this win isn't going to propel him to Israel Adesanya. The guy I saw fighting can't beat Israel Adesanya. He starts too slow. He still depends on those blitzes and his athletics and his aggression. And even though he's got a good jab and he builds on it occasionally, he doesn't consistently build on it. He doesn't consistently come behind it. These guys are basically tailor-made for Israel Adesanya. They're both guys who like to stand up. They're both guys who are very hittable. One of them's a slow starter. One of them's a fast starter who runs out of ideas after a round and a half. And he's not even very technical. So even though I don't think Adesanya is unbeatable, neither guy separated themselves. Till
this was Till's chance to become elite by beating an elite guy. This is Robert Whittaker's chance to announce that he's here to stay and he's also elite. He still may be elite, but that performance didn't tell me that he's elite. It tells me that he's come back. He's worked some things out. He's maybe physically still there as a fighter, but it didn't tell me that he's leveled up. It didn't tell me that they've addressed some of the holes that he had previously to the Adesanya fight. In fact, it looks like his team, much like Till's team, is riding on his physical tools to get him where they need him to be. He still is not doing certain things that are going to protect him against a certain caliber of athlete. And if he fought Israel Adesanya in the next fight, I expect Israel to finish him in one round. And if somehow Darren Till would have won that fight, I'd expect Israel Adesanya to finish him in one round. Both guys look dangerous, but they also look very vulnerable and not nearly as dynamic as you would expect them to be athletically or technically.
Interesting thoughts there, sir. What do you do with the winner and loser of this fight? In my opinion, I think that Whittaker should, not Whittaker, excuse me. Actually, for Whittaker, well, no, he's already fought him, but I think that Darren Till is in a position where he doesn't drop too much, but I could see him placed against someone. Let me pull my ratings up like I was looking at earlier. I think that Darren Till could benefit off of facing someone like a Uriah Hall or a Brad Tavares or someone or like a Jack Hermanson maybe. Someone who Hermanson's coming off a win, so that would be a little bit more difficult. Maybe even that Yoel Romero fight he was ducking so much. But there's a lot of guys around him that are winning. Paulo Costa, Jared Cannonier, Jack Hermanson, like we just mentioned. A lot of guys around him that are winning that I think he needs to stay away from.
I think this stage it's hard to hide him. It's like he beat Kelvin Gastelum, but was that really an impressive performance? Was that fight of the night? Was that really like, oh wow, he showed? It didn't. And there's a lot of guys who hit hard, who are better athletes than him, who can exploit the holes he has. Like initially, he'll do his work because of his movement and his range, but defensively, he's so hittable if a guy is willing to commit to getting at him. And he doesn't seem to have any ability to lessen his ability to get hit. Cannonier is a killer puncher. Costa is a killer puncher. Adesanya is a killer striker. Like they're guys who could finish him dynamically. Uriah Hall is also a guy who mentally you never know where he's at, but as far as his actual build, his offensive skill and his explosiveness and his durability, he's better than Till. So it's like there's no fight that Till's gonna get. It's gonna be an easy fight. Tavares might be a good fit because Tavares isn't really a technician. Tavares isn't really a killer puncher. He's like a less skilled, less offensively measured version of Till. He throws volume. He's not long. He's big and strong. He's hittable. That might be a fight that favors Till because Till would have a skill advantage. He's have length advantage. And even if it got ugly, I feel that he could engage in a firefight with Tavares. But guys like Cannonier, that's 50-50 fight at best for Till. Costa, I don't even want to know what Costa would do to him. He can't hurt him, and Costa can kill him. If Uriah Hall's locked in, Uriah Hall walks through Darren Till, in my opinion. Not because he can't fight at all, but just because he has the right weaknesses to be exploited by that type of fighter.
Interesting that you said Uriah Hall walks through Darren Till. I think I would be interested in seeing that fight because the thing about Uriah Hall is that we never know what guy's going to show up. We just never know what version of him is going to really show up. For Robert Whittaker, though, I would love to see him fight a Jared Cannonier or a Jack Hermanson. He can't go right back to a title shot. I don't think he performed well enough for that. He can't go right back to that. But I think that he can face someone like a Jared Cannonier or a Jack Hermanson, and if he picks up a big win there, then okay, you can put him back in the title picture. But right now, I think he can go right back to the title shot.
I prefer to even get him 2 fights. The biggest issue I have with him is he's still having a problem building off his jab. He's still using those blitzes, which when somebody feints, it exposes him and walks him into shots. Somebody like Adesanya has the length and the timing, and he's composed enough. He'll stand in there for those blitzes and punch with you. He'll take a shot to land one, but he'll punch in between your punches, and he's a sharp puncher. We've already seen what he's done to Whittaker. Paulo Costa maybe isn't as sharp technically, but he can handle the power, and he hits much, much harder than Whittaker. So Whittaker is going to be in a give and take with him. I'd really like to see Whittaker fight somebody who's got some durability and a range of skills to see if he can work more on his defense and work more on having a more offensively responsible approach, it's going to protect him. Somebody like a Hermanson, maybe the winner or the winner of the Brunson Edmund fight. I just very concerned about him going in with any super big dynamic hitters right now, because early on Whittaker is very vulnerable to speed and aggression. And he's still not sharp. And he hasn't proven to me he's defensively sound enough that he can navigate those spots. And given all the wars he's been in and all the injuries he's been in, I feel like he's really at a tipping point, and he needs to really sharpen his game and have it be offensively responsible and defensively responsible so he can navigate those rough spots. Because I don't think he has it in him to be taking too many more big shots and getting dropped. Even late in the fight against Till, I felt there were moments Till was close to taking over, where Till was backing him up. And Till's not, like I said, not super technical, not super athletic, not the biggest hitter either. I don't know what Cannonier does if he lands like that early in the first round. I don't know what Paulo Costa does to him if he lands like that in the first round. I know we've already seen what Israel Adesanya does to him when he lands big in the first round. So I think they really need to take it slow, start reinstalling these things, developing layers in his game, and bring him along against ranked tough guys, but guys who can give him rounds and guys who he can test drive these other skills he's going to need to survive against the better guys. The Robert Whittaker we saw Saturday does not beat Costa, does not beat Adesanya. I don't know that Robert Whittaker beats Uriah Hall in a rematch. In fact, if they rematch right now, I say Hall beats him.
You think Hall beats Robert Whittaker if they rematch right now?
Right now. Maybe 6 months from now he won't. Maybe a year from now he won't. But right now, I don't think Whittaker can get past him.
Okay, I can get with you on that. I'll be willing to see that. One rematch I am not willing to see right now, though, is Mauricio Shogun Rua and Antonio Nogueira. I don't need to see these guys fight again. I don't need to see I don't need to see them fight each other, and I don't need to see them fight anybody else. There has to be a point where we say enough is enough. Yes, Nogueira may have retired on Saturday, and he didn't really even commit to retiring. Nogueira or Rua is talking about still fighting. He's won 3 of his last 5, I believe. But at some point, enough has to be enough. We see guys retire from basketball. Michael Jordan had to finally walk away at some point in time. We see guys walk away from football. Peyton Manning had to walk away before his head got ripped off his neck. Peyton Manning had to walk away. Who else? Emmitt Smith had to walk away at some point in time. So Luke Kuechly for the Panthers had to walk away at a young age because of all of the concussions. But yet you have MMA. You got Bigfoot talking about he's coming out of retirement. He hasn't fought in 3 years. He did that bare knuckle fighting fight, but he's going back to LFA. He's will be fighting again coming up. What on earth is going on with these heavyweights not going in, and what do we do with these guys that are trying to stick around past their prime?
Well, it's tough because in Rua's case, he's been winning more than he's losing, and he's knocked off a few guys who are younger and has some prospects to them. The simple fact, the one thing I will give him credit for is at his peak, he was an offensive dynamo, explosive, durable, dynamic with techniques, and just a wrecking ball. And as he lost his explosiveness, he lost some of his durability, he lost some of his agility, he still managed to rebuild himself into a fighter who, even when he loses, generally puts on fairly good performances. He's turned himself into pretty much one of the better counterpunchers in the sport, especially considering the fact that his reflexes and his explosiveness is not anywhere near its prime. For him to be as effective as he is, even at this weight class, is impressive because all the other guys who were dominant in that weight class during that time, they're all gone. Hendo's gone. Nogueira might as well be gone. Rampage is no longer big. I mean, Rashad Evans has been gone for years. Rashad Evans couldn't buy a win. Forrest Griffin, all these guys who were ahead of him, Chuck Liddell, Tito Ortiz was still in there. They're all gone. They're no longer competing at the highest level. They're no longer consistently putting wins together against competition. So to that degree, it's hard for me to say he needs to retire, even though he doesn't look great, because he's still finding ways to win. And if you can still find ways to win, it's hard for me to tell you, hey, you shouldn't be doing this anymore. Somebody should be able to beat you, give you a 2 or 3 fight losing streak, and send you on the way. That hasn't happened yet. So to that regard, it's hard to say that for him. Nogueira, to be honest, both guys need to be done. But they're in a division full of guys who either are their age, so they're not at a huge physical disadvantage, or B, they're facing guys who were athletically there, but it's like we talked about with Glover Teixeira. These guys are all athleticism and conditioning. They don't have any seasoning. They don't have any skill. They don't know how to work their way out of tough spots. The jump in competition is so wide. They go from facing a guy who barely knows anything about fighting to facing a guy who's a pride champion or has been in the UFC for 5 or 6 years. The gap in experience and technique is so broad that they're instantly punished. Even if they have huge physical advantages, they get finished, they get punished, and that's why you don't see a lot of rotation in heavyweight or light heavyweight. Both guys should retire, but once again, what are they retiring to? I mean, the UFC doesn't set them up like NBA and other thing where you can be an analyst or you can be a spokesman, especially not nowadays. What are they retiring to? Maybe there's nothing else they want to do. Maybe there's no clear path where they can make this kind of money. I have no idea. But should they, as far as competitive reasons, it's not a good look because they don't put on. It's not a good look for them to fight each other. It's not a good look to have a bunch of old men knocking off young contenders and supposedly the toughest sport of them all. When in no other sport do you see guys like this consistently as impressively knocking off younger guys. But it's kind of the nature of the beast. If you can't beat him, it's hard to tell him to go on his way. I mean, for all we know, he could be 2 fights off from a title fight. He fights Glover Teixeira, beats him. He might be in the line for a title fight if we're being honest.
But at what point in time is enough though? Like,
he can't compete? When he can't compete. That's going to be the point. That's what he's going to say. When I can't compete. When I put a 3-4 fight losing streak, 2 fight losing streak together, we can talk. But I'm winning 3 out of 4. I'm winning 2 out of 3.
I think that's a slippery slope because all of that damage, all of that damage piles up to when I may be undefeated or not undefeated, but I may have won 3 of my last 5, 4 of my last 6. But I get up one morning and I have Parkinson's disease or something like that because it's been beaten to me, or I have too much CTE or something like that.
I agree that 100%, but the fact of the matter is we have no control over that. And we talked about that with fighters before. Fans don't care as soon as you can't fight. Well, we're saying retire. You're saying mind your own business. You don't know what it's like to be a fighter. Okay, well, I have to mind my own business then. You're having options to take other avenues or do other things with your life. Shogun's been fighting for how long? Like 10, 13 years? I mean, you should at some point have set something up better for yourself, but you haven't. And people are concerned for you. People want your well-being. I'm sure his family wants him to be done, but he's choosing not to be. So if he's insistent on putting himself in these risks and putting himself in these positions, then the only thing I can go back to is calling the fight as it is. It's like when Anthony Smith said, "Y'all are babies, stop complaining, I can take care of myself." Okay, well, since you can take care of yourself, now I'm just going to look at it strictly for what it is.
That's
what
I'm
going to do with it.
Can't argue with you on that. Let's move on to another fight, this heavyweight bout between Fabricio Werdum and Alexander Gustafsson. It's funny, everybody was pretty much leaning on Gustafsson, expecting him to win, calling thick Gustafsson was going to be a change in his career. And I'm not sure if this is more of a Werdum win or a Gustafsson loss. I'm leaning more of a Werdum win because once he gets his hands on you, once he worked his ass off for that takedown to get Werdum or get Gustafsson down and get into a solid position to set up that armbar. But I believe this was the last fight on his contract, and he's finishing. But he's planning on continuing fighting. There's some rumors I've been reading about him potentially going back to Bellator to rematch Fedor. What is Verdum's place as a heavyweight? He's a former champion. He has a lot of good solid wins over Cain Velasquez and others. What is his place as a heavyweight in the UFC and beyond?
I think his place is being probably the best submission heavyweight of all time. No other. He's faced a litany of high level grapplers in MMA, and he's found a way to essentially beat them all and submit a lot of them. So I mean, I can't think of another guy. Maybe Frank Mir has had had submissions that made more of an impression due to who he got him against or the damage done. But outside of that, who do you know as a submission type heavyweight who's done more work against a wider variety of guys than Fabricio Werdum?
He's the top. Like, it's not even close. He's won world titles, ADCC titles, and he's submitted just about everybody there is to submit in MMA. So it really shouldn't even be a conversation at this point in time.
Yeah, that's his reputation. I mean, for the most part, that's his reputation. Even with some of the peaks and valleys, especially the valleys he's had, That's going to be his reputation. And the fact that he kind of turned his career around, he was never really considered anything special. And then all of a sudden he turned himself into one of the best heavyweights in mixed martial arts. He kind of changed his style, turned it more to a physical volume type style, more physical, more of a striker. And he kind of switched paths halfway at the crossroads of his career and showed us something else, not just the grappling skills, but the physicality, the offensive striking, and the pressure and the volume. So that's also something he'll be known for. I don't know that he's known as one of the best heavyweights. I guess you have to automatically, but some of the losses he had, especially when he was supposed to be around his peak or he was on his run, make you question whether he's in that caliber. And some of the guys he beat weren't at their peak when he beat them, which brings up more questions. But definitely one of the best, if not the best, submission wrestler in mixed martial arts history.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that. He's there. Like you have him, you have Damian Maya was ADCC champion as well. Who else? World champion is that? I can't really. I mean, obviously you have Mackenzie Dern. She's a champion in ADCC and also IBJ.
A lot of them never can translate it over to the MMA though. They're great there, but they can never translate it. I mean, they might win fights, but they're never winning them by submission. Like Mackenzie Dern, there's a lot of fights she didn't win by submission. She just outlasted someone. She grinded him out. For you to come in and not just have those skills, but routinely be able to flaunt them against, it is heavyweight, but elite competition is something to be said because a lot of guys come from high-level grappling backgrounds and they don't get a lot of finishes. Maybe early, but when they get to UFC, then you don't see those submissions nearly as much.
I can agree with you on that for sure. Let's talk about Gustafsson though. He took this L. And I can't really say it's not like it's not like he went out there and got thumped. He got out grappled by someone who will out grapple 99 out of 100 heavyweights in the world, almost 100 out of 100. Is this indicative of how we expect him to look in this new weight class? We shouldn't be calling for him to go back down to 205. I think he still has some value at heavyweight. What are your thoughts there?
I just don't. My biggest concern with Gustafsson was when he came in thick and big. I get you're trying to get stronger because you got to be more durable and all that. But the fact of the matter is, against natural heavyweights, you're really never gonna make up that mass. That's their natural body weight, dude. Like the weight you would walk into is the weight they're trying to cut down to. They're always gonna have a size and to a degree a durability advantage unless you're a much, much better athlete. And at this point, at this stage of his life, he's never been a dynamic athlete, and at this stage, he's even more so. He's not explosive. He's not really dynamic in his punching power and his moves. He's just a little bit quicker, more agile. For him to come in and try to match weight, to me, that was ridiculous. I thought he should have come in lighter, like closer to his light heavyweight, and try to use a stick and move approach. Like just turn him, be light on your feet, try and outwork him make him work hard for that first round and a half. And so then maybe if he gets a submission, maybe he can't finish the takedown because he's so tired. Maybe he can't get the submission because he's a half a beat slow because he's trying to catch his breath or trying to get control instead of rolling right for the submission. I didn't think that getting bigger was going to play any favor because he's not a knockout puncher. He's never really been one. He's a volume guy. The more volume you throw, especially if you're stationary, it's easier for me to get to you. As much as he moves, he's not great defensively against guys with some reach and a little bit of craft. So I really felt coming in. I felt when he came in this thick Gustafsson, I was like, that's not a good game plan. His biggest thing should be trying to avoid him. But Bricio isn't chasing anybody down really. You can turn him, you can twist him, you can pop him with a jab, you can kick him with long weapons. And I felt he should have approached the fight a little bit differently. I know he tried to do it a little bit, but I felt the biggest way to exploit Verdum was to exploit routine weaknesses. He doesn't have good footwork. He's not very well conditioned at this point. And you can outwork him if you move. And it seemed like he wasn't prepared to fight Verdum. It's like he thought he was done and he was just going to walk through. And I think a lot of people thought Verdum was done and he was going to get walked through because of the last guy who beat him. But the last guy's a better grappler than Gustafsson, and he's a natural heavyweight. So there's certain things he could do to defend submissions and get certain positions that Gustafsson was never going to be able to do.
True. Okay. I don't want to talk too much more about Alexander Gustafsson. We're going to move on to two more individuals from this fight on Saturday. Carla Esparza, she keeps winning. I mean, there's really nothing else beyond that. She keeps finding a way to win. Is she really a threat to the belt, or are we going to see a situation where she's placed against the top 3 or 4 and she doesn't get the job done? Like if we look right now, she's sitting at number 7 still. I don't know if these ratings have been updated, but she wants that rematch with Claudia Gadelha. Nina Ansaroff is out because she's pregnant. I don't know if you saw the video of her hitting pads still, man. She's still putting in that work, carrying a baby.
Yeah.
She's like 7, 8 months now, and she's still putting in work. Nina Ansaroff, she's out. Tatiana Suarez is out because of her neck. You have Joanna Jacek. Obviously, Joanna beat the hell out of Claudia Gadelha back in the day to take the title from her. Jessica Andrade, they have not fought, I don't think. So you could potentially do that. And then you obviously have Rose Namajunas, who's expected to be next for Wiley J. Out of those names there, Gadelha, Jacek, and Andrade, who is the best one that Esparza has? Who's the individual Esparza has the best chance of beating?
I guess Jadrick, just because she's faded. She's not who she is. She's been through a lot of wars. She's a little bit more hittable than she used to be. Her pace doesn't seem to be quite what it is, so any day she could fall off. But if you tell me Jadrick is going to be 100% when she fights Esparza, she'll still beat her. Esparza isn't a great athlete. As much as she's improved on the feet, it's more been a strategic improvement more than technical. She takes the right strategy. She'll make adjustments in what she's doing to get to spots and to be successful. But she's declined as an athlete. She's not as quick or as explosive as she used to be, and she was never quick or explosive. She's not a big hitter. And even though she can take punishment, she doesn't respond well to punishment as far as her body. I mean, when she gets hit, she looks like she gets hit. And a lot of her ability to win is she's facing girls who don't have the all-round skill set or the seasoning to exploit her when they've got wins in their hands. When she fought Rodriguez was giving her the business. Rodriguez was putting her in some tough spots, but then Rodriguez is just conceding things. She's getting into prolonged ground exchanges with a better grappler and a better wrestler. She's striking from the bottom, which is being effective to a certain degree, but she's still on the bottom and still being controlled. She's getting taken down because she's not setting up her strike. She's not fading her way in and keeping Carla at range. She's letting Carla get to her spot. She's letting Carla get to her body. She's allowing Carla to make it look like she's being more effective and more dominant than she is. And that's just a lack of experience. That's poor preparation. And in this win streak that Carla's had, she's fought a lot of physically limited and somewhat inexperienced opponents who make the kind of mistakes and have the kind of lack of focus or engagement that allows her to take over a fight or control a fight. And that's basically been it. She hasn't beaten a really elite fighter who's accomplished really a lot in the UFC in this win streak. I mean, Michelle Waterson, as much of a name as she is and as much as she's had good wins, Michelle Waterson has never really set the UFC on fire. She's never been in that top 3 class, and she has limitations based on her size and her own physicality. She beat who's the one who moved up in weight after she beat her? Alexis Grasso. As good as Alexis Grasso is, she's not a person who consistently fights. She fights in spots. She'll start off slow. She's been historically someone who starts off slow. And Marina Rodriguez, she's a girl who every time she faces a certain caliber opponent, all she can do is draw. She does just enough to draw. And even in her wins, she hasn't been nearly dynamic or super impressive. She's kind of eked out wins as it has been, like grinded out, workman-like performances. So Carla hasn't had to face a person with elite talent or elite experience. And the one time she did, she faced Gadelha. Gadelha beat her. Might have been close, but Gadelha still beat her. And when she faced another person with kind of elite kind of talent, she lost. It was competitive, but she still lost against Tatiana Suarez. Again, second-tier talent, people who aren't really established as far as fighters, don't have established identities. Yeah, she does great. But against the best of the best, she still hasn't really put wins together. So I have no reason to think that if you have her face the best again, that she's going to do much better. I don't think she beats Rose. I don't think she beats Wiley. I don't think she beats Joanna unless Joanna's completely fallen off of a cliff. And I know she doesn't beat Andrade, even though Andrade hasn't looked great in the last 2 wins. I don't think she beats Andrade either. So she's talking about she'll probably get an elite opponent, but at this stage, I don't even know that she beats Amanda Rivas. She might be able to walk her down, but given the gaps in their skill set and athleticism, this is the kind of opponent who usually wipes the floor with Esparza. And the fact that Esparza is calling for Claudia Gadelha lets me know that she knows that she
she's at a certain level herself. I don't care if it's personal. This is business. You're trying to get to a title. You're trying to get the big money. You're trying to become a champion again. Why are you calling out Claudia Gadelha?
What? Excuse me. Something I was just sitting here thinking, listening to you talk about the way Esparza has performed. I feel like she's the type of person that would get wins like the early Frankie Edgar did. Those scrappy, I'm going to outpoint you wins, and people may not like the fact that I won, or people may come up with all these reasons and formulas why I may have actually lost, but I did enough in the judges' eyes to pick up a victory, especially looking back at that first win over BJ Penn. If Carla Esparza is going to get back to the title picture and defeat some of these women ranked ahead of her, I think that's how she's going to get that done.
I just don't think she's going to. Like, she's improved. Her striking has improved. She's more defensively sound. She's a little more sensitive offensively. She's not just striking to set up a takedown. She's willing to engage a little bit in strikes and get into extended exchanges. She sets up her strikes a little bit better. Since she's willing to commit to strikes now, they hide her takedowns a little bit better. And sometimes she understands she just has to bite down and get to her positions, even if it means she's going to get the worst of it. But the fact of the matter is, her wrestling isn't all that much better. And even though she's better defensively on the ground, she still physically has a hard time with girls with a certain amount of length, a certain amount of physicality, and a certain amount of athleticism. I mean, Marina Rodriguez has a very shallow skill set, and she has a very shallow game plan in her preparation. And she was giving Carla all she could handle. The fact of the matter is, Marina's IQ, her awareness, and her overall skill set wasn't enough to beat someone like Carla, who has different approaches, can switch strategies, can switch gears, can go from trying to stay on the outside to feint to get you to commit so she can get a takedown, to pressuring you to get to the cage to get to a takedown, to getting in extended exchanges to get you to overcommit so she can get to a takedown. You take her down, she can work from the bottom from submissions and work sweeps. She gets from the top, she can just control you and chip you up. She just has a lot of different ways she can approach things. She does the same things, but she has a lot of different avenues she gets to her spots to and her goals to. Against an unseasoned girl who's used to fighting pretty straight ahead fighters, it's too much. It's too much. It's too much. But against more accomplished, more skilled people with that athleticism, she's not able to get to her spots. I mean, there's a reason Joanna made her look so bad. She couldn't get anything done against Joanna, and she looks incredible against Rose. And at this stage, I still don't think she can get those spots against Rose either. So Carla Esparza is fighting very smart, very cerebral. She's showing an array of skills, and she's better yet, she's showing awareness and an understanding of the ebb and flow of a fight. But you can only scheme and game plan and strategize so much where there's a huge gap in talent, where there's a huge gap in overall skill. Against all the elite girls, she has a huge gap in talent and skill. And you can't scheme past that. You can't scheme past that. When it gets to that kind of level, you can't out scheme that. You can scheme it to where it's a competitive loss, but you can't scheme with that many gaps and make that from a loss to a win, in my opinion. And I say this is the person who regularly comes up with game plans and ways to beat people. At a certain point, talent and physical tools and skills come into play. And as good as Carla's gotten, she hasn't gotten good enough to beat the elite people in that division.
Interesting thoughts there, man. It's funny. We're really, I didn't expect us to be talking this much about the fight card from Saturday, but there's one more individual I want to talk about because he seems to be all the rage, and you know exactly who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Hazmat Chimaev, who fought for the second time in 10 days, picking up a TKO victory in the first round. This fight, his opponent didn't even throw any strikes. He's beaten two guys in 10 days. Neither one of them has landed any punches on him. I think he's outscored them in strikes like 182-2 or something like that, something ridiculous. But the thing is, that's making me not mad, but this is what MMA fans do. They immediately start talking about how we're going to put him up against a ranked opponent or something along those lines. Talk to me, Schwan. How stupid would it be, even if the UFC took him and put him up against, I think he's fighting at 170. He wants to go down to 155. I think that's what he said. But let's see, if he stayed at 170, you even have fucking Dana White talking about he's ready to fight Kamaru Usman or something along those lines, which is fucking ridiculous. But if you put him in there with like an Anthony Pettis or a Neil Magny, something like that, what type of fight would we expect to see? Is that too much for this guy at this point in time?
I think given the dominance and the fact where he comes from and his skill set, I really think you could move him up a little bit faster than the average prospect. But the thing about it is, and it's like anybody's on a win streak, especially when where they're not having to work. You question what happens when he doesn't get to his spot. What happens when he doesn't get that takedown? What happens when he tries to get into a spot and the guy pivots out and blasts him with a head kick or blasts him with a counter hook? What happens if the guy sticks a jab at him and he can't get to where he wants? We don't know how he's going to react because he's essentially had it his way. And I like to see guys get a little bit of pushback so I can see mentally where they're at when you don't get the submission the way you want to. When you take the guy down, he gets right back up. But when you don't even get the takedown, he throws you off. And what happens when you're on that end of it? We don't really know because these guys haven't been able to put any sort of resistance against him. The UFC obviously thought he was at a certain level. They didn't gauge his talent and his skill set correctly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have blown through those guys like that. And maybe he's just that good, but we don't know because he's fought pretty nondescript opponents. I don't think you should rush him. Even if he could beat these guys, why do it right now? Get him 2, 3, 4 fights, build him so that when you face a bigger guy, you can build the fight better and have more highlights about how dominant he's been, how impressive he's been, and it sets the table, and you can make the fight even bigger than it is. Dana's job is just to make new stars and to get new hype and to get people interested in it so he can say whatever he wants. But like I said, I think they should just keep the approach. Move up to a different caliber guy. You beat 2 more of those guys, move up to a different caliber guy. Give the fans time to get excited. Give the fans time to get acclimated to who you are and what you do so that you can get those big fights. Because even if you're winning, if you don't have a name or you don't have some kind of heat behind you, guess what happens? You get stuck fighting these clowns and fighting these low-ranked guys who aren't getting you anywhere. And the big guys get to avoid you. Look at Ryan Hall. They get to avoid you because you're not beating any names. You haven't put enough out there to force their hand. So the main thing you have to do is take the fights necessarily, keep winning them impressively, and make it to the point where the big guys can avoid you. I'm not saying you don't move them up some, but for me to just, the whole Usman talk, that's just a bit much for me. Pettis, as good as he is athletically, he's not who he used to be, and he's vulnerable to grappling. That might be a good fight to get him into. I don't know if Pettis takes it. That might be a good fight. Maybe Diego Ferreira, maybe he can fight him. I mean, that guy's a little bit more accomplished, but once again, he's a guy who's a grappling heavy style. So now maybe we get to see this guy stand up because he's facing a guy who he can't just ragdoll and easily submit. You want him with style matchups to teach us something new about him. We've already seen that he can grapple. We've already seen that if you're not a certain caliber of grappler wrestler, you can't handle him. So let's see what he does against a guy who either presents enough danger on the feet where he has to be careful, or a guy who's good enough on the ground where we don't know exactly what's going to happen if it hits there. Maybe who's that guy? Gunnar Nelson. Maybe Gunnar Nelson might be nice. Gunnar Nelson's lost a couple. He hasn't really been on a win streak, but he's a good grappler. He's an athletic striker. He will be able to pose some questions. And Neil Magny, of course, but Neil Magny always seems to struggle against a certain level athlete. Gunnar Nelson or Neil Magny would be good fights, I think.
Yeah, Neil Magny is ranked number 14. I think that is a good pick too. Same with Gunnar Nelson.
I think Gunnar Nelson would be a good matchup. He's athletic. He's got awkward striking style. And he's been good enough to hang on the ground with Damian Maia fairly well. And other people. And he's tough. He's fairly durable. He hits pretty hard. He's gotten respect from more dangerous guys. And he's not highly ranked, but he's a guy who's been able to compete with and go rounds with, if not beat, better guys than who this guy's faced. And I think that would tell you a lot. You beat Gunnar Nelson impressively, we move it to Neil Magny. You beat Neil Magny, well, now we got to start pushing you because you've been going through guys so quickly. To do what they did with Israel Adesanya, Tavares, they had I forgot the first guy I faced, but then they went to Tavares, and then once it got through Tavares, they had to keep pushing him because he was beating guys who were established known quantities. At least do the same thing with this guy. Give him another 2 fights, ascending level of opposition, and then we'll start talking about the names in the division. But I'm saying at least 6 to 8 months he's got before he gets to that point.
True, I can agree with you on that. Let's look forward to this weekend's card. We don't have a whole lot because I don't want to talk about a whole bunch of this event. There isn't anything that really stands out to me other than the 2 and the main and co-main event. Derek Brunson versus Edmund Shabazzian. I was looking at Derek Brunson's record in the UFC, And he's a guy who will not go away, but he's someone who he just doesn't, no one sends him away. If you look at who he's lost to nothing but champions. Israel Adesanya, Jacare's beaten him twice, Anderson Silva, which was I think a questionable decision, and Robert Whittaker and Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero is a two-time title challenger. Outside of that, since his time in the UFC, that's it. I mean, I totally forgot how good this guy is. He's won two. He's put together. He's lost 5 times in the UFC, and he's won, I believe, 12 is the number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10. Excuse me. So he's 10-5 in the UFC, but it feels like he's just been around and relevant for much, much, much longer than that. What is it about Derek Brunson that makes him such a tough out for people?
Well, it's really just his athleticism and his power. That's really what separates it. In his best cases, when he uses his wrestling, along with his prodigious size and athleticism, that's what makes him the most dangerous guy. But that was back when he used to work with Greg Jackson. He used to fight a little bit more poise, a little bit more offensive structure, a little bit. He fought more responsibly so as not to expose himself defensively. But when he's gotten away from Greg Jackson, it seems his defensive awareness isn't really there. The structure there doesn't seem to be a connected structure as far as what he's trying to do and how to go about doing it. And the biggest thing with Brunson is really just the athleticism. He's so dangerous. He's capable of finishing guys at any moment. And if you're not a certain caliber of athlete or a certain caliber of fighter, he's going to be able to get you out of there. But if you really look at his wins haven't been great against great talents. I mean, Lorenz Larkin is a great talent, so you could say that. But, Yoel Romero, a certain kind of athlete, certain kind of fighter, Jacare, Israel Adesanya, Robert Whittaker, when he gets to a certain caliber, he seems to struggle when his athleticism and his power isn't enough to just overwhelm guys. And that's why I always had a hard time really ranking him as anything as a fighter, because I didn't always see him put it all together. It was a lot of quick finishes, a lot of guys just couldn't handle what he could do or how he was approaching him. But when he wasn't able to impose his will right off the bat, he generally doesn't win. He generally doesn't look all that great. And that's always been my concern for him. But just based off athleticism, he's fairly durable, and his physical tools, he's going to be a top 8, top 5, top fighter in the division. He's just that dangerous. But when I look at the finer aspects of his skills and his ability to apply them, I have a lot of questions for him. Those losses he had weren't super competitive losses. They were pretty bad losses. Even the loss against Anderson Silva that's disputed, he had a hard time getting Anderson down. He had a hard time keeping Anderson down. He had a hard time hurting Anderson, who a couple fights before was getting dropped left and right by Michael Bisping. It makes you wonder, like, what are you missing? How are you unable to consistently put rounds together in an impressive enough fashion to win clearly against Anderson? Other people did it. Other top-ranked fighters do it. How are you unable to? Even if you think he won it, how come he couldn't do enough to put a stamp on it to separate himself?
Yeah, he seems to have not been able to do that at any point in time, but he just keeps remaining relevant in the 185-pound division. And he has an undefeated opponent in Shabazzian, who is looking for a statement win. Right now, he has that win over Brad Tavares. Tavares was a top name at one point in time, and he looked good. But I'm not sure if this is a fight that Shabazzian is ready for at this point in time. If he is, yes, we can almost make him sign so delivered to be a top contender in the near future. But I don't think this is the right fight at the right time. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it is, because you're facing a guy who's accomplished, a guy who's dangerous, but also a guy who's been noticeably vulnerable against a certain class of fighter. When you look at the guys he's beat, Ed Herman, Dan Kelly, even a faded Lyoto Machida, when you see the guys he's beaten, I don't see a lot of elite guys on there. I don't see a lot of elite talents on there. The only guy who's the elite talent he's beaten would be Uriah Hall, and like you said before, it's a good win, but it was a quick win. Most of his wins are quick wins. When fights go past a round, they go past 2 rounds, he tends not to perform nearly as well. It's like if he can't assert himself and take over the fight and build a lead or finish right off the bat, he seems to be unable to do anything of note consistently through 3 rounds. He just wasn't able to. He wasn't able to assert himself against Adesanya. He couldn't get going. Adesanya picked him apart. He was able to assert himself against Silva. He did some good things. He might have even won it, but at no point did he run away from the fight. The later the fight went, the less consistently effective he was. When he fought Robert Whittaker, he had huge moments and bursts, but he could never put together enough offense to put the fight away. When he fought Yoel Romero, he was doing very well, but he could never do enough to put Yoel Romero away or to finish out the fight and win. He's just never been able to consistently put things together. He has huge moments, and then he has huge lulls. Edmund isn't super experienced, but Edmund's athletic. He hits hard. He might not be as skilled as Brunson in certain areas, but he's shown an array of skills. He's shown some grappling. He's shown some wrestling. He's shown some striking. I don't remember the last time Derek Brunson has really brought out the wrestling. I don't know that the time that he's ever really grappled with anybody. He's essentially turned himself into an athletic striker, not super technical, not super layered in his offense, and very hittable defensively. I think this is a great win for him. If Brunson knocks him out, it's what Brunson has done to a certain class of fighter and lets us know that Edmund has more work to do. If Edmund takes him out, he's following the trend of guys who were elite guys, because generally Brunson only loses to a certain caliber of guy. And if Edmund beats him, by proxy, that means he's one of those guys. And as much experience as Brunson has, Brunson doesn't fight very smart. I mean, to be quite honest, every time he knocks somebody out, he could have just been as easily been knocked out himself. So even though he's got more experience, he's fought better opposition, I don't know that he has a skill set to take advantage of the lack of experience that Edmund has. I don't know that he has a skill set to really take advantage of it. He has the athleticism. He has the aggression, but does he have the experience? Has he ever seemed like a really nuanced, poised fighter to you? You ever put those words together when you think of a Derek Brunson fighting? I don't. I've never put the clever, smart, restrained, poised, mature, technical. I never put those words in the center with Derek Brunson. Aggressive, hard-hitting, hittable, dangerous, kind of a front runner. Yeah. The other stuff? Nah, not even close. So even though he's more experienced,
close, huh?
yeah, he's more experienced. He might get him out there. But if he gets him out there, how's he gonna get him out there? Land a couple big bombs. They ain't gonna tell us nothing new about Derek Brunson. They ain't gonna show any improvement. He takes him down and submits him. Oh, okay. Well, then we talking about different Derek Brunson. We both know that's not gonna happen. He's gonna go out there guns blazing, trying to finish. And in trying to finish, a lot of times he's come close to being finished himself. So it's going to be one of those situations, hit or miss, bang, bang. It could be over that quick. But if it goes past a round and a half, historically, Brunson has not looked great.
I can't disagree with you there, sir. Not at all. Let me look at my agenda and see what Joanne Calderwood. She's fighting Jennifer Maia. So I have a question here. I saw this fight and I was putting together the agenda for tonight. Wasn't Joanne Calderwood's booked to fight Valentina Shevchenko? Like, did I make that up?
No, she was, but then Shevchenko got hurt and had surgery, so UFC doesn't pay their fighters enough to sit on the sideline. So I guess they need a payday.
So that's tough because I was looking at this and I'm like, Jennifer Maia is a dangerous fight. If you went from fighting for the title to fighting Jennifer Maia, that's a very dangerous step back. Break this fight down and tell me why Maia may be someone that Calderwood doesn't want to face if she had a title fight in her back pocket.
If JoJo was a different kind of fighter, it'd be a real easy fight, but she's not. Like Calderwood, I'm a fan of her, but a lot of Calderwood's success is she's a slow starter. Even now, when she starts a little bit faster, she still tends to start kind of slow. A lot of her success is based off her ability to get clinches, her kicking, her physicality, and her physicality and her physical strength. She's facing Jennifer Maia, who's had issues making weight, but who's also known as a very physical fighter, a very strong fighter, a very durable fighter. You know, she's not very diverse in her striking, but the fact of the matter is JoJo Calderwood isn't very diverse in her defense. Her offense has gotten a little bit sharper and a little bit smarter, but if you throw some feints in or you're determined to get to JoJo Calderwood, 9 times out of 10 you can't get to her. She's not very hard to find with her footwork. She's not very hard to find in her defensive maneuvers. Her style of striking kind of puts her in the line of fire. The only advantage she has in the case of Maia is Maia's not a high volume striker. Maia's not a high volume striker. She's not a knockout striker. She's kind of a grinder, boxer, kind of physical type of fighter. But given the holes that JoJo has historically shown, there's no reason to think that Maya isn't more than capable of taking advantage of those things and exposing her. It's just a dangerous fight given the flaws that JoJo Calderwood has had in her career. She's not quick-footed. She's fairly hittable. Um, she doesn't really master range very well, and a lot of her, when she gets stung or when she gets hurt, a lot of what she relies on is her ability to physically control you, take you down, get you in clinches, back you up. That's not going to be easily done against Jennifer Maia. As limited as she is, Jennifer Maia is a big, physical, strong fighter. So she's going to be able to shrug her off. She's going to be able to get back up. She should be able to get off the cage, and she should be able to put some shots together on Calderwood. So it's a risk based off of who Calderwood is as a fighter. I'm not saying they're the same class of fighter, but based off the things Calderwood historically has issues with, Maya is more than capable of putting her in some bad spots, more than capable of exploiting the holes in her game.
If she loses this fight, how bad would that look on Calderwood's team for having her step in this situation?
I don't know if it looks bad on Calderwood's team. It might look bad on the UFC because your fighter is fighting. She's obviously on a win streak, and she doesn't have enough money to sit and wait. I mean, clearly she's fighting for money. I mean, but NBA players don't rush back from injuries. You know why? Because they have contracts that pay them enough money where there's no need to rush. And a lot of pro athletes don't have to because of the investment put into them. Clearly, Calderwood doesn't have any fight scheduled, so she's trying to, like I said, Shevchenko's might be out for another 6 months. Can Calderwood go a year without fighting? I don't know a fighter in the UFC who can go a year without fighting. Unless your name's, Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey, somebody of that nature. I mean, her team, I don't know if her team brought it to her, but the final word is hers. And while I wouldn't suggest them to bring it to her, I don't have to pay her bills. And some of the people on her team are in a more in-depth relationship with her, so obviously she trusts them. I wouldn't do it. But then again, like I said, when finances come up, you end up doing a lot of things that you might not have previously wanted to do.
True. I can't disagree with you.
I mean,
is there anything else that
even if Maya doesn't make weight and she beats her still, she's still gonna lose that title shot. So it's like she's not a big enough draw. So I mean, Maya didn't even have to come in and wait. I don't know that Maya gets the title shot if she beats Calderwood, but I know that if Calderwood loses, the title shot's gone, and she won't be anywhere near one for quite a while, in my opinion.
Nowhere near one at all. Let's talk about anything else. Or is anyone else on this card that stands out to you? It didn't really look like that to me. Ed Herman isn't going anywhere, but I got a question about him in a minute.
Just the Lando Venata Bobby Green fight should be exciting. It won't necessarily be an important fight, but it should be an exciting one. You got one guy who likes to defend and be slick and awkward to hit, and oftentimes doesn't do quite enough offensively. Then you got Lando Venata, who's a guy who's very offensive, come forward, throws a lot of esoteric, tricky strikes, but doesn't often do enough defensively to keep himself from winning. So that'd be an interesting fight because it's polar opposites clashing. So that should be exciting. That should be interesting. It's a rematch of a fight they had previously, which was close to a fight of the night. It won't be an important fight because neither one of these guys has established themselves as an elite fighter, but it'll be a fight that I think all fans will tune in to see and should reward all fans with a good performance.
Good stuff there, sir. Good stuff. Let's get some listener questions today. If Calderwood is a top contender at 125, we don't see her as a true threat to Valentina Shevchenko. Are there any? Are there any real threats for her at 125 pounds? What are they going to do with that division?
I think Calderwood has some avenues to beat Valentina. It would require a pitch perfect fight from her, but I feel given her, like I said, her physical strength, her physicality, a lot of the advantage that Valentina has isn't that she's just more explosive than these girls. She can physically fight them off, even if she doesn't defend your takedown perfectly correct. Technically, she's physically able to rip you off of her and shove you down. You take her down, even if she doesn't do the switch or the reversal perfectly. She's used to having Amanda Nunes' big ass on her, Holly Holmes' big ass on her, Sarah Kaufman grinding on her. Those people who come in the cage like 140, 150. She's facing girls who come in the cage around 130, 135. So she can handle their physicality. She can back them off a little bit. I feel like JoJo is one of the stronger girls, and if she could get her hands on her and get her into some she could probably muscle her into some bad position, or at least neutralize her, so that it becomes less of a matter of just straight getting bullied or getting dominated. But once again, the skills on the feet are such a disparity, especially defensively for JoJo in JoJo's case, and even in the grappling, where I think she's a better grappler, I don't know that she can control Valentina, because Valentina's such a better athlete and seems to be able to fight at such a higher pace for such a extended period of time. In the weight class, I don't know who's really a threat for her, like a real threat. JoJo has a fairly good chance, I think, but I think Amanda Rivas has a chance. If she moved up weight class, or she wants to fight two weight classes, she's got a skill set that's interesting to me, where I could say athletically she's comparable to Valentina, and she's got enough skills across the board where whether she's on her back or she's on top, she could threaten Valentina. She could punish Valentina if Valentina was too eager or got too comfortable in a certain spot. So from that regard, I think Rivas has a chance. I think if Andrade moved up, I think her style is tailor made for Valentina, but she's still one of the better athletes. She's still probably a little bit quicker, and she's still very physical strong. She was manhandling bantamweights. So once again, she wouldn't have a huge athletic advantage. She wouldn't have a huge strength advantage. She'd have a huge skill advantage. She might kill Andrade on the feet, but you could see it interesting just because she wouldn't have as big a gap athletically. Maybe Andrade, maybe Wiley. Wiley wants to fight, and right now it's not looking like too many people can compete with Valentina. Wiley, Andrade, and I'd like to see Rose fight her. I don't think Rose ever will, but Wiley, Andrade, and maybe Rivas really are the girls who I think who could move up and have a chance of fighting her and doing well. Outside of that, I can't name anybody. I can't say anybody right off the bat is a good match for her. She's just so much better on the feet. She's just so much better athletically. And none of these girls they're not dominant enough in any one skill set where they have as big advantage over a Valentina as Valentina has over them. The advantage Valentina has athletically and on the feet is light years better. These girls might be a couple steps better than her on the ground. If I'm light years better in two areas and you're a couple steps better than me in one, that's not a big enough gap for you to close the distance, and that's the problem. But I think Rivas, Andrade, and Wiley have the potential to challenge her and have the potential to be threats to her. Outside of that, I can't really name anybody.
True thoughts there, sir. Last question I wanted to talk to you about was actually something everyone saw on Saturday, and it was pretty comical. It was pretty sad at the same time. But Sinesa Estrada and Miranda Atkins, you saw that 6-second knockout, right?
Yes.
What was worse, this knockout or Elimele McFarland's knockout of Soccer Mom a couple years ago in the MMA cage?
I'd say they were almost equal. The only thing with McFarland is you have if you're outskilled in one area, you can force the fight to other areas. You can take down, you can grab. You have avenues where you can completely avoid one aspect. In boxing, you can't avoid boxing. You can clinch, you can do a lot of things, but you have to risk. You have to get in certain positions to nullify those things. I can't bash it too much because everybody's like, well, she wasn't a caliber. She was lower level. She was 6-0 as a fighter, and maybe she fought low level competition, but she was 6-0 as a boxer. I saw somebody fight what some people call the best boxer ever with really no pro fights, who came in 0-0 as a pro boxer, and he fought the best defensive boxer probably of all time and one of the top 15, top 20 boxers, top 10, whatever, depending on your list, number 1 to top number 25, one of the best boxers of all time. So how can I hate on somebody facing somebody of that caliber when we saw somebody who was 0-0 as a pro boxer face one of the best, most elite boxers of this generation?
So let me ask this. If she was 6-0...
Wait, one more point. We also have Clay Collard, who is an MMA fighter, who for the past 6 months has been knocking off highly accomplished amateur fighters, guys with flawless records who had amateur experience and been boxing all their lives. He's been knocking them off. So I'm not saying it's a good fight. I'm not saying the matchup was right. I'm not saying I respect it, but we saw 0-0 against 49-0, and we've seen a guy who's got multiple losses as a pro facing undefeated, highly ranked amateurs who've won every sort of amateur competition at every single level from city to world, and he's knocking them off. So in that theory, it's not too far a stretch to say that she could have won. It's not likely, but Clay Collard's wins aren't likely. And even though
I mean, he's
Mayweather
been in there
carried
putting in work.
McGregor, yeah, she has too. She's 6-0. She's been boxing. I'm not saying it's the same, but there's. I'm not saying it's right, but when we compare it to other things, whether McGregor was carried or not, he went 10 rounds. One of the best fighters. You can say whatever, but the fact is, he went 10 rounds. On the record, it's going to say 10 rounds. Carried or not, he went 10 rounds. Clay Collard is not that good a technical boxer. He is not that experienced a boxer, and he's gone out there and knocked off some of the highly ranked, highly invested in top talent that boxing is seen, and he's been knocking them off, and he's not even undefeated himself. So
How many
when
has he won
compared to those
straight? Is it like three or
three or
wait?
four,
I still feel like he's lost one in between there.
yeah, but even his loss, it was a competitive loss. It wasn't like he just got wiped out.
Let me check.
He's
You keep
been
talking. Let me
beating
check.
he's been beating highly ranked guys who are pros, undefeated, who have extensive amateur careers and showed a high level of skill as amateurs. And you can say amateurs isn't pro, but they're more accomplished as boxers. They're more experienced as boxers. Those fights shouldn't have been made. It's just
His
he
last
was
loss
able to
was back in
perform.
2019. He
Yes, he was able to
and
perform.
since
Look
then
at the
he's
record.
won
Look at the
he's
records of the
seven
guys
and
he's
one.
beaten. These are guys they
So
put money into. These are guys who are
yeah,
supposed to be potential champions, potential contenders.
I mean shit. He's won
Clay
4 fights
Collard,
this year, and in those four he's stopped two and got a split decision against one and unanimous against the other.
and these are guys who are like undefeated. These are high ranked prospects. They paid a lot of money. He wasn't supposed to win those fights. And I'm not saying that fight was made. That girl shouldn't have been in there. She's not the caliber. She's not the class. But once again, in women's boxing, it doesn't have as many bodies. It doesn't have as many combatants. Sometimes a girl might fight a girl 2 or 3 times in her career because there's no one else who will fight her. She'll just have to take the fight. And I don't approve of it. I don't necessarily respect it. She obviously wasn't ready. But let's just say she would have won it. Then what would the story have been? This girl's a fraud, the other girl's a phony. It's a great news story for everybody. It's a risk you take every time. The girl, even though she wasn't ready for it, she had the opportunity to have the upset or the performance of her life. She was unable to do it. And that's what we expected. But if she would have been able to put on a performance, if she would have been able to win, what would the storyline have been? Should have happened? No. But let's face it, in combat sports, there's not enough people who compete in combat sports for you to get the right matchup, to get a fair matchup. But that happens every night. We just saw it on a big platform. That happens every night in boxing. You know how many guys, amateur guys, face guys with losing records, guys who were 20 as boxers, getting rolled out against a guy who's been an amateur world champion 4 times in a row, is bigger, stronger, and faster than him? This happens regularly. It's just disgusting because A, it's woman, and B, because we all saw it. But it happens every day. It happens all the time. And when that guy who's the underdog knocks out the favorite, we don't feel bad for the favorite. Obviously, they weren't ready for a tough fight and they lost, but nobody feels sorry for them. We just look down on them and say, they messed up. They should be ashamed. They aren't who they said they were. They're a fraud. When it goes the way it's supposed to go, then we feel bad and it's hard to look at.
True, I can agree with that. Schwan, let everybody know what you're working on, sir.
Me, I am working on, as usual. I'm working on my live action pieces, trying to get some more requests in and trying to get it just right. Because, like I said, these are made up people from comic books and movies, and people take them very seriously, like it's a real life fighter with real life feelings. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. But I'm going to take it seriously because you take it seriously. Other than that, I'm tweeting about boxing on through MMA ratings. I'm tweeting about different camps, different fights, my assessment of fighters, kind of more in-depth breakdowns of what I see from fighters. I can't, due to the constraints of the show, we don't have hours and hours to go over every technical aspect. So sometimes I'll go through MMA ratings and I'll just get on a fighter and I'll kind of break it down and engage with the fans to give my take on what their limitations, whether it be strategic, technical, or physical.
Good. I am, covering MMA and wrestling as we usually do. You can find me at rgarcia_sports, which is where our content always is and will be. My content will be there. Schwan Holmes, you can find him at Black Jordan Breen. MMA Ratings, you can catch us over at MMA Ratings Net and MMA Ratings Net on Instagram and Twitter, MMAratings.net for our flagship. And this show every Tuesday, wrestling every Thursday or Friday, depending on what I feel like doing. But with that in mind, we will be back here next week to talk about this weekend's action and also preview yet another busy weekend of combat sports because we have, man, August is nuts. You see the number of cards they have? They have almost 2 a week for August. It's going to be
Yeah,
bananas.
yeah, it's pretty crazy, man. It is pretty crazy.
It's going to be bananas month, but we'll be here to cover it. We'll keep you informed, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of work that myself, Schwan, Adam, and Mike will be putting into all the MMA ratings content. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and close this episode out. We'll be back next week. Stay safe, everyone, and wear your goddamn mask.
Yep. Cosign. Stay safe, everybody.